Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to unravel the massive, awe-inspiring scope of biology. But look, instead of getting bogged down in just a bunch of disconnected textbook facts, we are going to explore it all through a single, fascinating framework. We're going to look at the story of life through the tale of two tiny mice. Let's dive right in. So, meet Paramyscus polynotus. Now, what's absolutely fascinating here is that the two mice you're looking at, they are the exact same species. Literally the same species, yet they couldn't look more different. On the left, we've got this beach mouse with a dappled, light coat that perfectly matches the white Florida sand dunes. And on the right, an inland mouse with dark fur completely blending into the dark soil just 30 kilometers away. So here is our central mystery. How do two populations of the exact same species perfectly demonstrate the core themes of life on Earth? To solve this, we really need to understand a core concept called emergent properties. You can think of it kind of like a bicycle. If you just have a box of disconnected gears and metal tubes, well, that's not going to get you anywhere, right? But if you arrange those exact same parts in a highly specific way, suddenly, boom, you have a working vehicle. In biology, as complexity increases, going from tiny atoms all the way up to massive ecosystems, brand new properties emerge at each step, just because of how the parts are arranged and interact. Basically, life is fundamentally all about this complex organization. So let's actually zoom in on this hierarchy of life. We'll start way up at the top, the biosphere, which encompasses literally all life on Earth. Now zoom in a bit closer, and we hit an ecosystem, like a meadow. Zoom in again, and we find the biological community. That's all the different organisms living together there. Down one more level gets us to a population, like a herd of mule deer or, you guessed it, our beach mice. And finally, we arrive at the organism level, an individual living thing. But the zooming doesn't stop there. The hierarchy continues inward. Inside our mouse, or really any plant or animal for that matter, organs and tissues break down into the fundamental unit of life, the cell. And inside the cell, highly ordered tiny structures called organelles. Finally, we go even deeper to hit the molecular level. It's actually way down here in the microscopic architecture of molecules that the secret to our mouse's coat color is hiding. Deep within the cells of our mice lies their DNA. And honestly, the absolute genius of DNA is its sheer simplicity. It's a double helix built from just 4 building blocks, or nucleotides, A, T, C, and G. Think about it, like the English alphabet. Just as rearranging those same 26 letters gives us an endless library of completely different books, specific sequences of these 4 simple genetic letters encode the staggering complexity of an organism's physical traits. That includes whether a mouse is born with light fur or dark fur. Okay, so how do those genetic letters actually turn into physical reality? Well, it happens through a process called gene expression. The sequence of DNA is transcribed into mRNA, which is then translated into a linked series of amino acids. These amino acids then fold into a highly specific shape to form a functional protein. So whether it's a structural protein for an eye or the exact pigment proteins that color our mice's fur, this is how the DNA blueprint is physically realized in the real world. All right, so both our beach mouse and our inland mouse have DNA dictating their fur color. But why? Why did two populations of the exact same species end up with completely different genetic instructions for coat color? To answer that, we have to turn to the core theme of biology. The evolutionary biologist Theodosius Dobzhansky famously wrote, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." It's a powerful thought, right? Evolution is the one unifying framework that explains both the universal genetic language of DNA we just talked about and the staggering diversity of life, like our differently colored mice. And the primary driver for this evolution? That would be Charles Darwin's famous mechanism of natural selection. Imagine a population of beetles varying from light gray to charcoal, living on soil that's just been blackened by a brush fire. When hungry birds arrive, they basically act as editors. They easily spot and eat the light-colored beetles that stick out against the dark ground. So, the darker beetles survive, reproduce, and pass on those dark-colored genes. Natural selection doesn't just invent new traits out of nowhere. It simply selects for the advantageous variations that are already there in the population. Now, in science, a brilliant idea like natural selection has to be rigorously tested. We're all taught this idealized version of the scientific method in school, right? You make an observation, ask a question, form a hypothesis, run a test, and analyze the results. Boom, science is done. Move on to the next thing. Well, not exactly. This rigid, perfectly linear step-by-step list is actually a bit of a myth,
And honestly, it makes science seem kind of robotic and solitary.
In reality, science is messy, it's dynamic, and it's a huge circular loop. You might start an experiment, realize your initial observations were completely flawed, and have to backtrack entirely. And maybe more importantly, it is intensely social. Researchers are constantly sharing findings, debating and reviewing each other's work. A hypothesis really only becomes accepted science after surviving the intense, rigorous scrutiny of the entire scientific community. Which brings us right back to our mice. In 2010, a biologist named Hopi Huckstra and her team decided to rigorously test the hypothesis that these specific coat colors evolved to protect the mice against predators. So they left the lab and built hundreds of plastic mouse models. They painted some light and some dark. Then they placed equal numbers of both types in both the beach and inland habitats, basically just leaving them out overnight to see which ones real-world predators, like owls and foxes, would actually attack.
Let's look at the data, because the findings from this controlled experiment were absolutely clear-cut. In the beach habitat, the dark, non-camouflaged models suffered a significantly higher percentage of attacks. Meanwhile, inland, the situation was perfectly reversed. The light models were the ones getting attacked way more often. It's a brilliant confirmation. Natural selection driven by predators clearly favors the genetic traits that match the specific environment. But listen, this story isn't just about the past. It's incredibly urgent for us today. See, evolution through natural selection takes countless generations. So what happens when the environment changes way faster than a population can actually adapt? Take the Sceloporus lizard in Mexico. Due to global climate change, their environment is rapidly warming. They're forced to spend way more time hiding from the heat and much less time foraging for food. Because of this, 12% of their populations have completely disappeared since 1975. And we're seeing the exact same pressures affecting polar bears as they lose their ice hunting platforms. Habitats are shifting, and they are shifting rapidly. Which brings us to a final, really pressing thought. We've seen how the emergent properties of DNA allow creatures like our little mice to be perfectly shaped by natural selection over time. But as human activity shifts global habitats at an unprecedented rate, honestly, far faster than the slow editing process of natural selection can possibly keep up with, what's going to happen to these perfectly adapted creatures? Understanding these fundamental themes of biology, it isn't just academic anymore. It's absolutely essential for the survival of life on Earth. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope it left you eager to keep exploring our incredible biosphere.